Yeah, we're live. It's 8:18. This is date night. We're already back. Had a great night with Lise, and so I thought I'd jump on and talk to you guys about what happened today. So the sprint, I was working on the sprint today. I did a bunch of stuff, but a couple of things I did was work on the sprint, and I got the engine out. So we'll be talking about that later on another live feed. I got the engine and transmission out and it's sitting on the ground, but also dropped the fuel tank, which, to be honest, I do not like working with. The worst part about working with older vehicles are the hoses. So in this case, on the fuel tank, we have three hoses. You've got a feed and a return, and probably some sort of vent. I don't think that might have had a canister or something on it, but there's a few hoses coming out of the fuel pump, and so they've got to run those out. They normally run them out to the side, which is what they did here. So I ended up having to cut all those. Just getting those hoses off, like getting the clamps. The clamps are all rusted because this thing's been sitting for a long time. So clamps are all rusted, but just getting the hoses off of the lines is takes way more time than I'm willing to spend. So it's just I just cut the very ends of the hoses. And so we can get those off. And then on all fuel tanks, and I think that this is true of any fuel tank, the hose because they always have, they have the filler neck up where you open your gas door and then you put the hose in, put the fuel hose in from the pump at the gas station. And then they have, you have the filler neck with a little flapper door on it. So you can only put, I don't know, unleaded in there or whatever. And then you have that, but then that runs down to, that's got a length of tubing on it, steel, stainless or something. And then there's always a length of hose, rubber hose, obviously designed for fuel use, that then goes into the tank, and the tank has a standoff on it. So this is a rubber hose that just connects the two. Getting that off after having been on since 1987 is a lot of work. Lucky for me, I took another trip, which is awesome. Took a trip to Harbor Freight today, which I always love. It's like going shopping. But what I needed there were some really big pry bars. So I grabbed a couple of different lengths, one of them really big. And then I grabbed an assortment. You guys have seen these since you're all Harbor Freight guys. You've seen them where the assortments, they have just different lengths. They shrink them down to small pry bars to like pretty good sized pry bar. And then you get the one that's over by itself. It's like, hey, you need me to come home with you just in case things get serious. And things did. I had to use the biggest pry bar that I had. And I bought it actually for both of the axles. The axles did not want to come out of the transmission. With this big pry bar, they came out of the transmission. You just had to get them, just had to pop them just right. It's not like we were hammering on them or chiseling them out or anything. But once you just get the right kind of leverage on it, and these have an angled end, and so you just poop, and they just pops right out. It's really nice. And so they both came out very easy. But the thing is, having the right tool is like a critical thing. So I could have struggled, for hours and hours and hours. Or I could have just driven the 10 miles or whatever to go over into the next town to go to Harbor Freight. I wish I would have got it the last time, because the day before I went and got a bunch of stuff from Harbor Freight as well. And as I was driving back, in fact, before I left, I thought, you know what? I should probably get some pry bars. They'll probably just come out and probably be fine. It's not fine. And also, when I got on the freeway from leaving my first time, I thought, you know what? I forgot a gas can. I wanted to get a gas can, so I'm going to have to drain the tank. The tank is full, as it turned out, when I dropped the tank. The tank is full. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to have to drain that, because I'm not going to use 6-year-old gas in anything. So I have to drain it to put it in something. I thought that what I would do is siphon the fuel out of there. But as it turned out, getting the line into there was more trouble. Again, just more time than I was willing to spend. I'm like, I'm just going to drop the tank. If it spills a little bit of gas, it spills a little bit of gas. I'll just angle the jack so that I don't have, so it tilts the tank in the right direction. So I don't have to, and we hardly any spilled at all. But after taking the lid off, which is in GM or Metro Suzuki, whoever built this car, in their infinite wisdom, they used, and this is because the car is so small that, you know, you look at a typical fuel tank, because the fuel tank for an EFI motor has the feed and the return, and then, like I said, some sort of vent, and then it's also got sending units for the level and stuff. And so there's a lot going on there. Normally what they have is they have some big opening with a cover plate on it that has a gasket and stuff and a little receiver for the gasket, and it's bolted down a lot of times by a whole bunch of different bolts. Like on the Honda, which I really like, it's got studs on it, and then it's got nuts on the top of it, and then also the plate is CAD plated or something, so it's very rarely do I find those rusted. And it's easy to take on and off. And also on the Honda, there's access to that. There's a little cover panel that is underneath the rear seat. You just pop the rear seat out like you do on every seat, like every rear seat for the hatch or whatever. You pop that out, and then there's a cover plate. On the Honda, 4 screws hold the cover plate on. Take the cover plate off, you got access to it. Sometimes, like with the Ford, it's not held on by a whole bunch of screws or bolts. It's held on by, it's got a receiver and an O-ring, and then it's got a spinning clip that you kind of hammer into place, and then you just hammer it and it rotates, and then the whole thing comes out. Because that's what's, when you hammer it, it's, you know, it has an increasing wedge, and so when it goes in there, it sticks. It's got a little lock on it, and then you just hammer it out, and it works really good. But this one had a bunch of screws holding it in. They're all Phillips heads. And they're all Phillips heads that have been in there since 1988 or 87. And so when you go to take them off, I was able to get some of them off, but not all of them. And so what I had to end up doing was use vice grips to grab the top. And then, you know, more problems with old cars. The problem is that the top of the tank has a whole bunch of like undercoating on it. And so it's hard, makes it harder to grab the tops of these little Phillips headed deals. And so what I'll probably do is I'll replace them with Allen's, or, you know, some other kind of fastener that's that thread size, probably an Allen, just so that we don't have to worry about using Phillips head screws on this thing. Because when they were put on, they were all tight, very tight, in fact, but too tight, and after years and years, and probably rusted on the bottoms of them or something, you know. So it was a little bit of a chore to get all those off. It just, and again, it's not an insurmountable thing. It's just a time thing, you know, because you have to, instead of just putting a screwdriver on there and turning them, or using a gun with a screwdriver on it, turning those, then you got to grab them all. You got to get vice grips. You got to clean off the edges around the screw head, and then be able to grab it. And you know, it pops off a couple of times, and you finally get to it, you can turn it and all, you know. So it's just, again, it's just a time consuming thing. So I finally got the tank dropped. We got that out, pulled the pump out. In the thumbnail, you can see the pump. It's quite rusty. And so my goal is I'm going to disassemble that pump away from all of that rust area, because I'm not going to be reusing that thing. But I just wanted to see if I like trying to find out if I can spray WD-40 in there and tap it with a hammer or a socket or a wrench or whatever, and even soak it a little bit and just get the thing running, and I can hook it up to power and see if I can get the thing working. I'll have to look inside and see how rusty it is. You can see all of the element from the sock, all that's got, you know, it's all come apart. It's not in good shape. It's probably the original one, and it's very, very old. The gas obviously smells like turpentine. It's just not good. But it's, you know, like with any project car, you go out and go, okay, today the engine's coming out. I know it's date night, and I am excited about taking Lisa out to dinner, having drinks and stuff. But you just decide, okay, the engine and trans are coming out today, so I'm going to get pry bars. I'm popping those things out. I had to figure out a couple of other things. Had to drop the exhaust, get that out of the way. So that's another area where the pry bars came in handy. Is if you take WD-40 and put it on the hangers, you could just pop the hangers off. You know, the rubber hangers come, if you put WD-40 on it, the rubber hangers just pop off of their little mounts, and so it makes dropping the exhaust very, very easy. Because what I first tried to do is the exhaust is in two pieces. So you have the flange that's connected to the downpipe on the turbo. It's just cast, and so that's a 2-bolt flange there. And then there's an intermediate section, like, after the cat, and then but before the cat back section, there's the 2-bolt flange there. That 2-bolt is not coming out. I hit it with my 1/2-inch Milwaukee impact, and it said, yeah, that's not happening today. And so the only thing that's going to happen is, because those are rusted so solid, that bolt or that nut is just going to break. It's either the nut was going to strip, or the whole thing is just going to come off. So I ended up just dropping the whole thing and pushing it over to the side. The problem is, you drop that, push it to the side, you go to put the cherry picker in, and the cherry picker wants to hit all of that stuff. It wants to hit the exhaust. It wants to hit both, and you guys know, wants to hit both of where you place your jack stands, because the whole thing is sitting up on jack stands. It wants to hit that, all of that stuff. The pry bar also came in handy for popping off the rubber coupling, that piece of hose I was telling you about, for the exhaust, for the gas tank. So, you could get it moving a little bit. It's like, if after I was able to get to the clamp and undo the clamp, but getting that piece off, you can't grab it, and move it. I was thinking, I'm just going to take a knife and cut it. I'm like, let's try to get it off. And so using the pry bar, using the big pry bar, I was able to move it just a little bit. And, you get some WD-40 up there, move it a little bit more, move it back, put some WD-40, and pretty soon it'll come all the way off. It took a little longer than I thought, because there's another hose, the vent hose, that's on the just right behind that's hidden. That's what's stopping the tank from dropping. And so I had to get that one off. So we finally got that one off. And then after that, the only thing I was worried about is I put the jack under it to lower the jack down, and, push it off to the side, push the wiring for it, the fuel pump and the sending unit, and stuff. Push it. It's very simple wiring. Just push that through the opening. It had a little grommet on there. We just pushed that through, and was able to drop it. But now now it just smells like turpentine in the garage. It's not good. I covered it back up and put a cover over it so that it's not outgassing that much. But I may take a little bit of that and just see if it's even flammable. Just put a little bit on the ground and see, hey, I wonder if that's even, like, has it gone that bad where it's not even flammable? Let's see. I'll see what you guys think. Okay, have you ever dropped a gas tank to change a fuel pump on anything? Doesn't matter. I've dropped my Mustang gas tank like 10 times. It's not good. I eventually just cut a hole in the back, because I'm like, I'm not going through this. Because whenever we had to change it, like for the Silver State, it was always in the rain and in the middle of the night. And so I said, you know what, Bernie, I'm not doing this anymore. I said, I'm cutting the trunk area, cutting a big opening and putting a hinge on it, and I'll be able to access a fuel pump. And if I have to change a fuel pump, we'll change the fuel pump right there. And so that actually worked out good. So let's see what you guys got going on. Special Agent Rich, knowledge. Good evening. Hit the like button. That's good. Crusty hoses, yeah. And everything else too. I had to do a lot of there. And when I first dropped the gas tank, there was it looked like a spider colony. It looked like the scene from Aliens, really. There were the whatever their little sacks that they make for the babies. There's a bunch of those everywhere. So I just sprayed everything with brake cleaner and WD-40 and stuff, because they tend to not like that stuff. But there are also leaves all over everything. I call them like the little helicopter leaves, the ones that drop down, and because they're heavier in the nose and they got a big fan on the backside of them, and so the helicopter their way down. Those are all over on the top, which is weird, on the top of the gas tank. And so I just cleaned all that off and vacuumed all that off. But it's all good stuff. I have to run new fuel hoses on my Roadster. How old are we talking? This car is 87 or 88. 12 hours into my 15-hour hard cab install on a brand new UTV. Got 20 hours left to go. Our LS Series PT 7675 Turbocharger 360 hydrodynamic good. I don't know what you mean by hydrodynamic good. What we do if it wasn't for Harbor Freight? Exactly. And the problem with Harbor Freight, it's like going into Costco. You go in there and you're like, okay, I just need pry bars. Yeah, I didn't just get pry bars. I did get my gas can. Super Zilla on those hoses comes apart like butter. We have saved the day on many occasions. General Metrozuki, that's right. Man, I don't know what you mean by hydrodynamic good. What is an old car? Anything that's not new. I wish you could go back in time and shake a stick at whoever invented the Phillips head screw. Phillips head screws are not bad for things that are don't have a torque setting on them. Put studs in there. Yeah, studs are a good idea too. If you think it's going to take 2 hours, plan on 4 at least. Even a flathead would be better. You know, if you have a nitrous controller, you can run more than 2 solenoids on one kit. Want to hook both stages together on one side of the controller. I'd be leery of that. Sometimes they don't work. We've tried to run multiple solenoids off of one side, and it didn't want to activate both of them. There isn't an old car, just a used one. Why would one need to degree a camshaft if both the crankshaft and cam dots line up? My apologies if you covered this before. Well, what you're trying to find out is what are those settings. First of all, like in an LS, you're going to have a lot of movement in the 2 sprockets anyways. So even if you line up the things dot to dot, if you move one or the other of those, they'll move independently because the timing chain has a lot of slack in it. So it's not going to be optimized. The other thing that people are really looking for when they're degreeing them is to make sure that the people that manufactured the cam, that the cam is what they say it is. And so they degree it in to check it to make sure that it is, that the valve events are accurate for what the guy says the camshaft is. The GoPed will love that gas. I need to put a new line on the GoPed. I've got the Trail 90s running, but I have to buy a new tire for it. I think I'm gonna just buy 2 tires. The rear tire went flat today. The U-joint straps don't require a whole bunch of torque, do they? Soapy water works. Worst thing about Phillips heads is, at least on the motorcycle, there's a JP spec screwdriver that's different enough to guarantee stripping them if you use regular style. Old rusty bolts are not good. Yeah, I went around and got WD-40 and stuff on all of the bolts and let it soak in there for a while because I had to take off a bunch of stuff. I took off the I'm not sure if this is the ideal way. When I was taking the half shafts out, I disconnected the strut, and I know the suspension's going to be off, or the alignment's going to be off, but I don't care about that. And then I undid the steering arm because getting the ball joint off, for some reason, it was just not cooperating. And I think ball joints, the way that they have them pinched like that, is just a terrible idea. There's got to be a way better way to do that. So you have to hammer on the end of them to get them out, and it's just not good. Gantry in the garage is a worthy fixture. What's up with the, let's see. What's up with the new laser rust removal? I haven't actually seen that in person. I think that would be cool if that's like really happening. I've got to do more cleaning on the engine bay now. This thing, it's still got, I cleaned it out and vacuumed it and stuff, and I even sprayed it off, but it really needs a good thorough cleaning. Smaller the carburetor, the more important fuel filters become. Mine on the GoPed has a crack in one of the hoses I found. So I need to fix that. And I think that that's the reason why we weren't getting really good full throttle results. Datsun fuel tank, 240Z things. I have one of those. I pulled the bed of my truck to get to the fuel tank. I need to do that on my truck. I've already changed the pump one time in my truck. I just lifted it up. I didn't take it off. But I want to put a 255 in my truck. Only ever on purpose. Been close to a couple times on bikes, so dropping the tank. But haven't. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Drill an access hole now that the tank is out. I plan on doing that on the on this motor. I don't know. I'm not certain right now that we'll be using this tank. I need to drain it and look in there and see how much rust is in there. If it has a bunch, we might try some acid, or I might just replace it with something else. We might put a fuel cell in it. On square body Chevys, you have to drop the tank because it's under the driver's seat of the cab. The egg sacs, yeah. I use silicone lube on my water soap leak finder for exhaust hangers. Axles, I use a slide hammer and add a 10-pound weight. Dropped a few tanks in my day, then added fuel cells. Kind of nice to go from 12 gallons to 20 gallons. Yeah. Just looked it up. GM and Chilton both show 15 foot-pounds. If I strip out a Phillips, I use a cutoff wheel to make them a large flathead. It's a good idea. I got a cutoff wheel. I bought one of those at Harbor Freight. I can't remember what I was going to use that for. Oh, I was going to use that to cut the opening for my access door for the fuel tank. I had a little Dremel one with a tiny little thing, and I started working on that. I'm like, yeah, this is going to take a year. This is not going to work. I dropped the 42-gallon tank in my dad's Suburban, not realizing it was 3/4 full. I was like right under it. It really got stuck when it came down. Yeah, and that's the thing with like when we were doing the Mustang at the Silver State and changing it in the rain, sitting out there like 2 or 3 in the morning or whatever. It's always when the tank's full too. It's never when the tank's empty because we had filled it up for the race, and then the fuel pump went out. We're like, oh, this is great. This is super fun. Dropped both tanks on a 2006 Corvette. Level sensors, 10 hours. Learned a lot. Now I can do it in halftime. That's the thing. You do get better on it the second time around. All of this stuff. It's been a long time since I did any work on a Sprint, and now that I've done it again, and you're like, oh yeah, I could do this fairly easy. I just have to remember now because I didn't write it down and I didn't film it where all the stuff goes, and also the real important thing is what order you have to put all that stuff back on, because that makes a difference. Richard, can you explain a little bit of the science between an F1 engine and why it's so smooth and revvy? What's going on inside to make it that way? Is it timing, material? The reason why it revs really high is because they're limited in displacement, and so they're trying to make power at a very, very high RPM at usually whatever the maximum RPM is. Dropped 5 tanks in the last year. A couple involved grinding through the straps when the tank is leaking. Yeah. It's very easy if you just cut the straps. These didn't have straps. These actually are bolted to the, when they stamp a fuel tank together, there's a ridge, and so the ridges have bolt holes in them. And so the ridges, basically the overhang for the tank, basically just bolt up to little receivers. And so there's no straps on it. The Mustang has straps on it. Is it a tiny camshaft in F1? No, it's a very, very big camshaft in terms of specs, because it's running out at 15 to 18,000 RPM, depending on which year Formula One you're talking about. Man, you don't get to ask that question again. You got to change your question. I don't know what you mean by hydrodynamic good. But if you ask the question, the same question again, then we got to say goodbye to you. Yeah, I've seen the guys at West Tech do the acid thing. I think on Ish's truck fuel tank, they use like muriatic acid, like pool acid, and then a chain inside there to try to knock all the rust off and stuff. And then the acid will eat it away. And so they did a really good job. It cleaned it out very well. Any tips or pointers on a 5.3 carbureted setup? No, I think we ran a degree or two more with the carb setup than we do with the Holly because I think that there's some delay in the MSD. I used 2 ratchet straps and a cherry picker. I got the bed out the way so I could inspect it. The easy way for, like, we've done that at West Tech where we just use the lift. Just lift the bed off. What is the difference between a tank and a fuel cell? A fuel cell usually has some sort of closed cell foam inside of it to really stop it from sloshing so that it picks up better. For moving the cabs on the F-Series trucks, they have a tool that heats up the bolts when they push it against the bolts. Seem to work. Okay. Aren't F1s short stroke engines? Yeah, because of the RPM, they're trying to maximize airflow. So they usually do, the bore size will be much bigger than the stroke on a Formula One motor. The Metro pulled one of those last year. Yeah, this is on a Sprint, but it's the same car essentially. Those Japanese engines use JIS screws, not Phillips. Is West Tech anything like Universal Technical Institute as far as the mechanics course goes? West Tech isn't a institute or anything. West Tech is a business, a dyno business where engine builders come and dyno their motors, and then also they have a chassis dyno. It's not an instruction thing or a school. Would you recommend a Paxton Novi 100 or maybe a 1000? You're thinking for a street-driven '94 Lincoln Town car with a 2-valve, too small blower, or just right? I don't know what a Novi 100 is. Maybe you need a Novi 1000. You don't want slosh in a circuit racer? No. Getting displacement from bore size instead of stroke allows larger valves on the same displacement. Yeah, if you can make the bore bigger, you get more head flow and all of that. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to maximize power in that way because they have enough RPM to take advantage of that. So in NHR drag racing with a 10,000 horsepower, do you know what size the cam is? Do I know what cam specs are in a top fuel? No, if Dan was here, he might have an idea. I don't know that they would give you that information, but he might have a rough idea. But the reason that they make so much power is because they run a lot of boost from the blower, but a lot of nitromethane. Yeah, a Novi 1000 is a good blower. It's fine for your 2-valve. It's more than enough power. Really tall cams. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what lift and duration would be for a top fuel cam. Yeah, Cup I would think would be even more secretive on their stuff. And is nitromethane really that effective in terms of horsepower? Yes, very, very much. That's why they've limited the amount that they can run. I don't know how accurate it is, but Brule told me that when you add nitromethane, whatever percentage of nitromethane you add, that's the percentage of power gain that you get. Do any videos up with that blower? I don't know if I have any with a Novi 1000. I think I have a 1200 or something, but they work the same. I mean, a 462 valve, you're not trying to make a whole bunch of power anyway, I would imagine. So it's more than enough. We ran a 462 valve, I think, on an S-trim Vortec way back in the day. Your opinion for an 85 Corvette? I'm a previous 85 Corvette owner, Z51 car. Healthy 385 TPIS mini ram. Would you go fast, easy EFI 2.0 or Holly? Worth the money? I don't know. I don't know about the fast, easy EFI thing. I don't think I've ever run that. I think the only one of those we've ever run was like a throttle body injection one. But I like the Holly better. What size motors do they run top fuel? They're limited at 500 inches. 400 to 500 horsepower on a 2-valve. Yeah, that blower is way more than that. I mean, it will support way more power than that. You're good. You're good to go. I think we did with the Vortec on that motor that we did on the 2-valve one. I think it made 670 or something. We'd be running an alternator. Yes. It makes it easier. It makes it easier on the EFI stuff. Not a 632. No, they're limited in displacement. Yeah, they're not Cadillac motors. They're all Hemis. Trying to decide to make an access panel or drop the tank. And an access panel is good. I'm glad that I didn't try to make an access panel on the Sprint because I didn't really know where the thing was. And I also didn't know how big it was. So the access panel would have to be big enough to get access to that whole thing to be able to get to all those bolts. And so it would be difficult to do. It must be white cheese. Pontiac twin turbos run 50% nitro in his field to keep up with the Hemi at 485 cubic inches. The nitro really helps. And guys that are running methanol, mixing it with nitromethane is a really good thing. You see a lot of the import stuff, the K series stuff that they're running all motor. A lot of those guys are running methanol and nitromethane. So just, you can make a lot more power that way. You're adding a whole bunch of power with just the fuel. I'd like to try some of it because I just think it's cool. I watched Cletus's deal. I watched Garrett's thing, and that was cool. I have no idea what kind of timing things want or any of that. But because the stoic value is like 1.7, it's, compared to 14.7, it takes a lot of fuel to make power with that. And so you got to have really, really big injectors and a really, really big fuel pump. In fact, I was watching today, I saw on social media, Evan Smith had a video where they showed, he was probably at a museum or something, where they showed the fuel flow of a top fuel motor, a single cylinder of the fuel flow. And they showed it at idle, and it was already quite a bit more than I thought at idle. And then they showed it when it was going. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's like fire hose stuff. Tried cutting an access panel on a friend's car and accidentally cut the fuel pump wires. Yeah, and my point was, before I went off on yet another tangent, is I'm glad that I didn't cut it or try to cut it because I didn't know where it was, and I also didn't know how big it was. And also, it's actually very, very close to the what I would be cutting. So it'd be fairly easy to cut through the tank itself or any of these other things that are there, the hoses and the fittings and stuff. And so that just, it's much better to drop it, do that my first time, show where it is, maybe it needs a new tank, whatever. 5 gallons or something for one run. Oh, for top fuel. Yeah, it's a lot. I have a 99 Ram, van 318, 400,000 miles. What should I keep an eye on? Oil pressure and then burning oil would give you an idea on how healthy it is. I mean, you could do a leak down test. Yeah, Garrett Cletus did the nitromethane thing. Since the engine's out of the Sprint, do you want a W41? Comes with a pallet cylinder heads. Local machine shop gave them to me and said that people only gave up on them when the Ecotech engine arrived. I think that the old Quad 4 stuff is really cool, but we have to run a 1 liter motor. We're going to run a Sprint motor because this is for Bonneville. It's not a drive around car swap kind of car. Nitromethane narrows your tuning window. It's so violent. You need someone who has experience to get started without engine damage. We bought an NA Harley drag bike and learned, but never got around to it. Well, you would start by adding 5% or 10% and then seeing where that is. The old 274 cam, how does it behave around town on 306 with decent heads? I ran it for 85,000 miles on my Mustang. And it runs fine. It definitely has it. You can definitely tell that it's a cam. And if you want better drivability, I would go down one step in camshaft. But back then, that's what I wanted. Do L7 lifters run into any oiling issue when used with the factory roller Gen 1 small block with a small base circle cam? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Are you using a factory hydraulic roller block? I don't know if that's going to bring the oiling band down out of its safe running area. I just have to look and do a measurement and see what's going on there. Have you ever dropped a gas tank to change a fuel pump? 87% are saying yes. Fuel tank bros. Yeah, that the thing that surprised me was not so much the fuel pump, but the sock that was the filter was just destroyed. But I like tapping on these pumps and then they just oh yeah, I just need to dislodge that one thing. It's been there for years. I'm glad you finally did that. I know that ProCharge Hemis that Sean runs use just over 4 gallons of fuel to do his burnout and run the 8th in 3.7 seconds. The Harley came with a tuning log for the Kinsler injection. Okay. On the 99 Ram, the intakes will leak at the plate and plenum. Probably already knew the dashes explode on that generation. The dashes do? Do they crack, you mean? I don't think do they explode? What would make them explode? Those keggers leak at the bottom, right? They leak in that common plate that bolts onto them. Seen multiple Ram trucks for sale with cracked, broken dashes. Yeah. Dropping the fuel tank on a Fiero is fun. Tank is in the center of the car. The drive shaft hump normally is. Touch the dash, they fall apart. That's on the Dodges. Sometimes fuel pumps need a little percussion motivation. Yeah, we'll tap on them and, like I said, spray stuff in there. You can let them soak in something, oil. Be good for them. 74 Dart, 5.7 Hemi, or SRT4 engine swap. Which would you pick? Are you going to run a north-south SRT4 engine? Or are you going to make it front-wheel drive? What's the most restrictive part of a blower compared to turbo? It seems like turbos just get bigger, but you can only get types of blowers that can only do what they do and nothing more or nothing less. That's not accurate. You can have centrifugal blowers and roots blowers that grow in size. Either one of them, they'll support lots of power. So you get centrifugal blowers that'll go 4,000 or 5,000 horsepower or whatever. And then you have the big roots blowers and the big twin screw blowers that are probably also support that level or more. They're using roots blowers on top fuel motors, so they will obviously support that power, but a lot of that power, a great percentage of that power, is from the fuel and not so much from the blower. But the blowers the blowers take 1,000 horsepower just to spin, so they're producing a lot of airflow. I changed one last summer. You can remove the dash with the dustpan. MR2 also in the tunnel. Yeah. I like the SRT4. I do too. I think that those are cool cars. I was just talking to Ben about those, how much better that motor is than the 8-valve Omni motor that I have. On the M90, I think the inlet port is the biggest restriction. I need to get more well-rounded with superchargers. Longitudinal Liberty housing. On the LS, the filter's in the tank on the pump assembly. Almost every factory EFI fuel pump has a sock covering the entry going into the fuel pump. And then it'll usually also have a smaller and even smaller one, a smaller micron inline pump or inline filter between the pump and then the injectors. Because you don't want any sort of debris that size that could get to the injector to clog the injector. But you also don't want the filter to restrict the fuel flow. We've had that happen a lot at Westech. When I say we, I mean Westech has had that happen a lot. On the chassis dyno side, we don't see that on the engine dyno side because they service the pump and the filters regularly. They put dates on the filters to see when they've changed those, so that we know that it needs to be looked at. But we're not really picking up a bunch of debris from the stainless tank that we're using to fill, and then all of the gas that gets poured in there gets poured in through a funnel that has a micro screen on it also, so keeps out the birds and small children and stuff. And so there, it's pre-filtered and post-filtered and all of that, so it's not really too much of an issue. But on the chassis dyno side, they have stuff that comes in all the time that has like, hey, the fuel pressure is dropping. Well, let's see why. It's a clogged fuel filter. Is there a type of supercharger you like more than others? No, the type of supercharger that anybody should pick, even me, is based on the needs that you're trying to fulfill. Whatever you got to pick for whatever thing you're trying to achieve, and then pick the best one that you think does that. PT Cruiser had Whipple supercharger kits, Magnuson kits too, for the 2.4 supercharged engine, was rated the same as a Spirit RT. Did you mean they had aftermarket kits? Because Whipple was never factory on anything. D42 1200 billet wheel journal bearing turbo on your website. What size is the compressor outlet? And would you recommend it for a drag and drive? I want to say that it's 3 inches. It should say on the site, right? Trying to remember what size. I'm thinking it went 3.5 or 3 to 3.5. I'm thinking that the intercooler is 3.5. Speaking of old cars, I just got an LQ4 power steering hooked up and an 81 El Camino. Nice. I'm liking it. I took off the AC in this thing in the Sprint, and it had no Freon in it. The thing that I liked is at least the coolant that was in the radiator. It wasn't full, but at least it had coolant and it was not just water. Yes, plug and pay, one up on eBay now. Oh, so yeah, if the blower that you're talking about, I've seen, and this is for the 8-valve. Mopar offered one of those. It's not a Whipple though. It's a Roots blower. They offered a kit for it. What are the benefits of running 16th rings over traditional 5/64th rings? Any difference in wear characteristics? Well, the lighter and smaller ring packages tend to, a more modern one would probably seal better than the older ring style. It also will have less tension on it. So it will be, you could make more power because of that. Any Florida man trips planned this year? Yes, I definitely want to go to Florida again and try to catch big snakes. And I think I would like to catch a gator too. Just cuz. Gators are nice. The crocodiles are the ones that you don't want to play with. The gators are all Florida chill, The 8-valve had the B&M 2.4 had a Whipple. Okay. Oh, so I didn't know. I thought that you were talking about the Omni and those, and not the SRT. I wouldn't pick a blower over a turbo for those motors. I definitely would pick a turbo. A blower would be unique if you went to when all those guys get together at their conventions or meets or whatever. 4th of July, Super Richie weekend at the Vegas Strip. We didn't live in Vegas. We lived in Henderson, which is right outside of Vegas. But the only time we ever went down to the Strip, because Lisa and I, we went down there, I think one night, for a date. But otherwise, the only time we went down there is when somebody would come into town to visit us, and we would just take them down there, and they would want to go down there. We had a 2020 GT500 with a supercharger having an aftermarket pulley-on and a non-smog legal air intake, and it was a riot to drive. Found a dyno printout claiming 892 at the tire. Yeah, that's certainly possible with that blower. It surprised me if that was with the factory blower, but with a Kenny Bell or something on there, that's pretty easy. What's the closest drag strip to me? I don't know. I think that there are probably some in Sacramento. I think guys run there. There's also one over at, I think there's a drag strip over at Sears Point that guys go to too. Fourth of July, I'm going to be working on Sprint Turbo Bonneville cars. Wow. I don't normally go to drag strips. I don't frequent them. I've been there for testing sometimes, but very rarely do I don't ever take my stuff to a drag strip. I'm next to Firebird. I've been there. I've raced there. What's your goal speed in the sprint? There's a bunch of records we're going after, and they're all different. What twin turbo setup would get me 1200 and still be responsive in an LQ4? 2 of our 3584s would do that, or a single G42 would also do that. 1200 flywheel, not 1200 at the tire. But the 2 GTX 3584 RSs would do 1200 at the tire pretty easily. Had a factory blower, but the pulley was really small, and the scan tool showed 28 to 30 psi in the intake sensor. Okay, yeah, I didn't know that the 122 blowers on the GT500 would make that much. Maybe they would. Well, I think that they would, because now thinking back at some of the things that guys have done recently, with the 1.9 LSA blowers, they've made a lot of power with this. What kind of aero mods are on the Sprint? There aren't any on there right now. We're going to run it in a couple of, like, one of the classes that we're running is called Production Supercharged, and there are no mods for that. Fuel injector brand recommendations. Yeah, we have at richardholdenerperformance.com, we sell injectors. So we have the 50-pound GM flex fuel injectors for a guy doing an NA thing. And then we have FIC stuff too. Those all work good. We've used them a bunch of times. They all make good power. They're all reliable. In other classes for the Sprint, we can do other modifications, air dams and belly pans and things. I'm not going to get crazy on the top side aero mods. Like, we can, in some classes, we could cut the top and lay the windshield back and do all kinds of stuff, but we're not doing any of that because I want it to be still look like a Sprint. I don't want it to look like because once you do that, then it has to be in that class. It could be in that class if we do other things, like the belly pan, we'll put it in that class. But we don't to go the speed that we need to go, we don't have to rely on that. We don't have to do all that nonsense. Last week, there was a freshwater crocodile caught roaming the flooded roads on the Gold Coast in Queensland, captured by national parks and relocated. Do they normally just stay in the waterways? The used car manager wants me to put it back to stock and smog legal. I'm just worried it might have aftermarket injectors. It's definitely going to have aftermarket injectors to make that kind of power. It can't do that on stock injectors. Gator tail is good eating. Any experience with Howard's extreme duty billet connecting rods? I don't have any experience with that. I feel pretty confident that they're going to be a lot better than stock, but I don't know how they would compare to something else, Carrillo or Potter or Sains or any of these other guys. So we'll close out our poll at, have you ever dropped a gas tank to change a fuel pump? Most people have, 85%. That's good. And I was part of that group and still am. I haven't forgotten how to do that. The nice thing is I get to, like on a lot of these bolts, I get to finally give them some attention because they have been sitting forever. That reminds me, I need to I want to check the struts and shocks to see if they're bad. The brakes are not good. Would it run with aftermarket injectors and a stock pulley? Yes, as long as the tune is there. Usually stay in fresh water in North Queensland. National Park seemed to think it was an illegal pet that escaped. Okay. This does not have coilovers on. The suspension is all stock on it right now. In fact, this motor was the whole thing is surprisingly stock. I mean, it has all of the heat shields and covers and everything, and it still has the intake rear brace and all that stuff. I noticed that some of the mounts and like some of the torque straps and stuff that they have for these are the rubber's gone on a lot of them, and so that stuff's going to need to be addressed. I don't know if I could find those anymore. If they're not available, I may just make urethane inserts for them. Shocks are surprisingly difficult to find for the sprints. Does a Metro one not work for the sprint? Is the height different? Mark 1 and Mark 2 are different. Okay. We could relocate the shock mounts or something. That's not hard. Well, I'm thinking about doing a coilover for it anyways, mostly so that we can adjust the ride height basically. But I would want something more stable than what I'm sure are just well used, been sitting for a long time stock struts on this. I doubt that they're original, but they're how difficult is it to make urethane items? I would just repurpose existing ones. Put the stock tune back in. It seems to run okay. Just worried about the cats passing monitors and not to run too rich. Yeah, I wouldn't put a stock tune back in it with the bigger injectors because it's not going to be happy doing that. I don't know if it will. I don't know how much range it has in closed loop. I don't know if it will adjust that much. Drill the towers and WRX coilovers in it. Just drill the mounts for it. Is that what you're talking about? I mean, they're just struts. Can't be that difficult. We've done, drilled out housings and put Coney inserts and stuff, and it's not going to be that big a deal. You need the injector data for those injectors in the tune. Will port matching a Performer 2.0 big block Chevy intake to unported stock large oval port heads be worth anything? Probably not. Is the intake already smaller than the head? I mean, if it makes you feel better, you can do it. And if you're porting the intake, that's the better of the two. Just because it's aluminum, it'll be easier to do. We're keeping the stock engine in the Sprint? No. I have now 4 engines for it. So the one that will eventually run Bonneville will be forged rod, forged piston, ported head, cam, different intake manifold, bigger turbo, different intercooler. Everything's going to be different. The block will still be stock. The first engine I'm going to put in there is my old one from my Sprint, which is nearly stock. It has a mildly ported head that we were doing with Fred from AccuFab. We were doing it solely for fuel mileage. Do you think a stock 5-liter 6-shift Fox is fun power in 2025? Yeah, I don't think it doesn't make very much power, but it's probably 1,000 pounds lighter than the other cars. So it's just a different kind of fun. Is this car a Chevy? A Chevy, the Sprint Turbo was sold by Chevrolet, yeah. You're running larger fuel lines for Bonneville engine, sticking with the stock injectors. No, we can't make 200 horsepower at the tire with stock injectors. It will definitely have different injectors in it. It has to, because stock injectors are way too small. I think the other injectors that I tried, I want to say that they were 19-pound Mustang injectors or something, when we were doing fuel mileage testing with them, because I like the spray pattern better on those. But it needs to be, we're going to put like 80 pounders in it or something. Uh, 1970 Chevy Nova, saving up for the G Comp Unser subframe. It costs $5,000. So you want to make it super cool. Rock Auto, I'm only seeing front struts for the Sprint. Okay. That's cool. I just need to measure the distance at ride height and see and then see how much travel it has. Looks like a Suzuki Swift. Yeah, Sprint Turbo looks like the Swift, and the well, later Fireflies would look more like Metros, but yeah, that's what Suzuki made this car. I mean, it has a Suzuki motor in it. I'm sure everything is probably Suzuki in it. They didn't sell very many of them. It wasn't very popular. Did you do 110 liter per hour upgrade? I haven't done a pump yet. I haven't drained the tank in it, but we are putting a bigger pump in it.
I need to go to CVS.
You're going there?
I need to.
Okay.
I'm waiting for you.
Okay. On that note, it is time to go. Yes, but more bigger fuel system, bigger turbo, all that stuff goes together. I will see you guys all tomorrow.